Hi friends, I'm Jeffy G. Welcome back to the show. You know, when you think about Native Instruments and their complete bundles, you think of all the sounds that they deliver. It's pretty good value for money. But you don't really think of it as being a source for drum machines. Let me explain what I'm talking about here. This is a pretty long video, and out of respect for your time and attention, I've divided things up into chapters. The initial stuff is all about why Native Instruments may be all that you need for drums. The latter part goes through each and every drum instrument with a bit of a walkthrough and a preview of some of the sounds and demos. Feel free to skip around, look at the parts that interest you the most, or come back to them later. If you go to the Native Instruments website and look for a Complete 14 Standard Edition, you might get the impression that they're mainly selling sounds, because it says a playground of sound. And as you scroll through this, they're going to cover what's new, and you'll see what's new is mainly instruments and some plug-in effect. And then as you scroll down a little bit more, you see, oh, it includes 15 synthesizers. That's cool. 37 sampled instruments. Yeah, that's neat. Okay, here we go now. 9 percussion tools. Well, 9 drum machines / percussion tools. It's quite a bit. I have a slightly different way of looking at the Native Instruments drum instruments. You can group them based on the way they look and the way they perform. There's a group I would call modern, which includes 40's very own drums, Empire brakes, and Butch Vig drums. And the reason I would group them together is they all have a similar looking interface and they have patterned loops. Then there's a traditional group, which would include Drum Lab, Abbey Road drums, and Studio Drummer. They all use grooves, which are MIDI files to control the patterns, and you can, of course, in both cases, modify the sounds of the drums themselves. Then there's a percussion group, of which Native Instruments identifies one as being West Africa. But in my mind, there's 2 others that fall into the sampled instrument category, but because they're percussion, I put them in this group, and that is Cuba and Kinetic Metal. And then finally, there are 2 tools which make up the Native Instruments suite, have been around for quite a while. There's Battery, which is a full-fledged drum machine tool with hundreds of kits, and there's Polyplex, which is a drum synth. I'm here in Logic, and the first one we're going to look at is 40's own drums, which is Noah Shabib from Drake's organization. He's both a producer and a beat maker. So when it first starts up, you see a kit with 16 pads, and you can play those sounds. On the left, in complete control, you see 15 different kits to start with, and I'm just going to sort of walk you through how these things work. At the bottom, there's a representation of a keyboard. If you have a Native Instruments keyboard, they're color-coded with the LEDs, but you don't need to have that kind of a keyboard. You can use your own. You can see that first octave down here is the notes themselves. And then this purple area are patterns. Another thing to be aware of is the 8 knobs that are generally on a lot of MIDI keyboards can be easily mapped. So I've got things like each one of these mapped to my launch key. If I kick off a pattern, I can make modifications with those knobs. Increase level. That knob labeled 40 has got to be one of the more interesting ones. What does it do exactly? You can increase the reverb. Crush. Saturation. The other thing you can do is execute a pattern either in its default or double time or half time. So let's try that again. The latch mode works with your DAW in that if you're executing those patterns, you see if I click on one, it automatically switches from one pattern to the next without finishing the first. In latch mode, in your DAW, it'll let you finish the first, click on the next one. So if you're using a pattern for a verse or a chorus and you want them all to be sequenced, you can turn on that latch mode. Back to the main view, there is a way to modify the kit. So you can choose another kit by just, selecting the kit on the left. and then you can preview the kit by playing a pattern. To get a sense of what it is. But if you want to modify the kit pieces and the sounds that you hear, you click on this kit page, and let's say we want to modify this clap. We can just click on the sample and we get a list of all the claps that are included in the kit. There we go, that one. And you can modify any of the 16 kit pieces. Plus you can tweak the sound with pitch, volume, pan, all of these standard parameters. So if I want to increase the pitch slightly of that clap, make it a little higher pitched or make it a little lower pitched. You get the idea. You can also add insert effects. There's quite a list of effects that are included. It also offers 2 sends, and the reason these sends exist is that you may want to send just a particular kit piece to 2 effects sends separately. In the effects area, there's actually 3 sets of effects. There's global effects that apply to the entire kit, and you can see those here: threshold, release, ceiling, output. Then there are insert effects that are specific to an instrument. So you see here the clap is highlighted in red, and I've added a flanger. I can get rid of that if I don't want it. And there are send effects. Then the last page here is macros. Well, by default, the macros are pre-assigned to these common functions down here at the bottom. But if you want to assign them to different functions, you have the option of assigning those macros to any of the effects or any of the control parameters for this drum sound. Let's listen to another one. What does Garden Baler kit sound like? And let's choose another one here. What's the garage sound like? Still in Logic with complete control, let's take a look at Empire Breaks. So you've got more than 20 kits here to choose from. I think there's 25 in total. So big variety. You can pick any one to start with. And the interesting thing about this is that you've got a wide variety of drums to choose from. And just like the first kit, the controls are pretty similar. You've got these 8 knobs down at the bottom. The keyboard split into both patterns and just drum sounds, so you can execute the sounds. You would program MIDI into your DAW. Taking a look at the patterns, it's familiar to what you saw in the previous one, but you see it's divided into main 1, 2, 3, 4, some variations. And you can execute those a couple different ways. You can just click on them. Or in my case, I have a launch pad next to me, so if I press and hold a button, a pad, it's going to play that until I lift my finger. There you go. And just like the previous, you've got your main view. You've got the option to change any of the kit pieces with all these parameters, and you've got patterns and effects. So let's just hear a few others. And I'm just previewing these sounds using the buttons, the pads on my launch pad. You could use your keyboard or any other way to execute the MIDI. One of the first instruments to take advantage of this modern look, feel, and sound was Butch Vig Drums. It's got the same 16 pads, and it has patterns as well. And I really like the sound of the Butch Vig Drums. They slightly distorted, heavily compressed, and there's some great sounds in here. What what you'll find is that these controls down at the bottom, the filter, the warmth, the grunge, they all have a significant impact on the sound of this kit. If you look at the effects, you'll find that they've made really good use of this Super GT effect, which I don't know a ton about it, but it definitely gives these drums that edgy, distorted, highly saturated sound. We'll try some different sounds here. Some people, these are going to be overdone and you're going to have to tweak the saturation and the effects. Here's one, Vinyl Won the Beast. I like how the patterns generally have a button for the ending that just does sort of a smash on the last beat, which is kind of cool. Now we're looking at the Abbey Road 60s drummer, or vintage drummer. And you can tell by looking at it that it's the older style of drum instruments from Native Instruments, but it's still really good. On the right, because we're using complete control, you can see there's about 15 preset kits to choose from. But let's just walk through some of the capabilities. It's pretty interesting. I'm displaying the keyboard down at the bottom, and you can see it's colored, but these colors don't represent patterns. They're strictly the drum hits. And the different colors relate to the different groups of drums. This page, called Kit, is where you get to see the kit, and whenever you select a drum, down here you can control parameters for that drum. Things like the attack and delay, the amount of overhead that's mixed in with this, room mix, which in a way captures the ambience of the room where the samples were recorded, the number of drums you see in this kit, the number of cymbals. Then off to the right, they have extra things like sticks, claps. Usually percussion is off to the side. And you can see every time I click on one of these parameters all adjust. So you can play around with the sound and model the sound of this 60s drummer. If you click on this knobs button, you'll see how the knobs on your controller are assigned. I've mentioned before, I'm using a Novation Launch Key 49. And I've mapped all of these knobs. So you can see I can, on the first page here, I can control the volume of each drum, or at least the first 8, and it might be on this second page. So you've got page 1, your first 8, page 2, your next 5. You got things like the room, reverb, master volume, pan, second page of pan, sends for effects, all these things. So that's the kit page. And jumping over to the left, there's a grooves page. So rather than patterns, they have grooves. And they're organized into sort of style or genre, beats per minute, and then you can click on any of these grooves and play them in this button. Those patterns might just be a starting point. When you drag them into your DAW, you can modify it there. It's just going to import as MIDI, and it's easy to modify. So if I and what I'm getting is a familiar MIDI pattern that I can modify, in my case in Logic. Within the grooves, you can control the sound slightly with these, or the way the MIDI is executed. You've got tightness, granularity of the grid, amount of swing, and whether the velocities are fixed at a certain level. And just like the newer tools, the tempo can be at normal, halftime, or double time. So there's literally hundreds here to choose from. The next page is the options page. Some of these things will look familiar, so I'm only going to go over them once. You have velocity curves that you can apply, a minimum and maximum range, so you don't want drums to execute with very low velocities. You can increase this number up to, say, 25 or 50. There's MIDI mapping information on what key is going to execute each drum part. And you can control that if you don't like the default assignments. Oh, here's a good feature. Trigger on mouse click. That would be handy. Go back to the kit. Oh, there is some randomness. In case you can turn random on. These knobs would control the degree of randomness. So if you want the volume to change over time, I'm sure this is a relative percentage. So if you put that at 25%, you're going to get some randomness in the volume. And the velocity values of your MIDI notes, if you have it up at 50% there, it's going to randomize the velocity values, which are between 1 and 127. Okay, the last thing they provide here is a mixer. And this is pretty common to all of the Native Instruments drum instruments, is that they have their own mixer built into the instrument itself in case you want to do your mixing here down to a stereo track in your DAW. My preference is always to map each one of these tracks to a track in my DAW. I like to do my mixing there, but they give you a lot of flexibility here with 3 buses or 3 sends and a lot of the typical parameters you'd be expecting. They've made it look like a console channel strip. And you can see down here you can control all your effects as well. So let's go back to the grooves and just listen to some of the kits. I'm going to pick, let's see, a soul groove maybe? Drum Lab is really good. It's, as you can see, a more traditional look like the 60s drummer was, but it comes with 60 presets, and the Drum Lab is really a generic tool for picking your whole drum kit and playing it in different modes, whereas the 60s drummer was targeting vintage sound. This one spans a much larger gamut. You can view it with the keyboard assignments or the key switches displayed down at the bottom here. And just like the other one, the knobs are pre-assigned to do different functions. Initially starts off by controlling volume, basically the same as the previous instrument. Drums, you can select and modify, and you've got the relative volume of each drum. Got configuration for your overhead mics, different options there, whether you use mono or stereo. So I'm just going to lower that a bit. What they've done here is they deliver both the drum selection, the effects immediately below, so you can modify that kick drum in many ways, the attack and resolution of the transients, a compressor, saturation knobs to give it that more gritty sound. There's an EQ and reverb for each drum. There are presets you can choose. And if you go to the grooves page, some of the same and some different, but the organization is similar. So you start out with a genre if you're after a really tight sound. Give you a representation, a mini sequencer view, I guess, that kind of represents the different parts of the drum. You can map any drum to a key switch. One of the things I like is that you have these overall settings that you can apply. Smooth sound, Special. It's quite special. So that's Drum Lab. It's a great set of sounds, and play through some of them. Of course, I use the same groove, and that doesn't necessarily emphasize the style of those drum kits, but it gives you a general idea of what Drum Lab sounds like. The third one of this traditional drum instrument from Native Instruments is called Studio Drummer, and as you can imagine, all of these kits on the left are more studio focused. They have less of an opportunity for live sounds, more of a very close, tight sound that you might use. And quite frankly, I like the sound of these quite a bit. The interface looks very similar to the 60s drummer. You can choose kits. You can modify the kits down here by assigning different parameters to each drum. And it has grooves. Again, they're organized by genre. So you got different groupings and different grooves available. Still a big variety to choose from. And I mentioned the knobs pre-assigned the same way they are for all the drum kits in Complete Control. You can control the relative volume of each drum up here. And on the second page, you can control everything, including the master volume, which one of these knobs, there we go, master. So how loud the master is. Everything else I've shown you before. You've seen all this on the options page, velocity curve, MIDI mapping, some degree of randomization. This one also has mixers. You can choose different style mixers. See up here, the drop down, you've got just different looking mixer configurations depending on the genre of music that you're trying to mix. So there's some presets to work with, which are pretty handy, and pretty much the same effects down at the bottom. You got a little over 50 kits on the left to choose from. In addition to the traditional drum kits that we've seen so far, there are percussion kits, and they have presets to choose from. On the left, lots of them. Takes quite a while to get familiar with what's in there. And each of those drums has configurable parameters in terms of a groove and the hits, the tune, and the bell volume of some of these instruments. You just click on them here and walk your way through, and you'll see the djembes sound different than congas, and all the drums can sound different with reverb, intensity, speed, variation. If you keep the variation low, you'll get a very simple beat. Fun to play with the variations and just run through them. On the left, when you pick one of these presets, you're getting not just a combination of drums, but you're getting an implied style. This edit view gives you a good sense of what all the drums are assigned to do. It delivers a little mixer. Like some of the other drum instruments, you can do your mixing of the different drum kit pieces right inside the instrument itself, or you can map each one of those instruments to a separate track in your DAW. For some strange reason, Native Instruments does not call Cuba a percussion instrument. They call it a sampled instrument. It's in a different category. But to me, it looks just like what we saw in West Africa with a different set of drums and a different set of feels. You can edit patterns, clear, copy. Remember, you can click on any drum and assign that drum to a particular group of sounds. One of the things I like here is that it has some individual drums available. So you can just pick one, kajong, and use that and program it in a certain way, which might be all you need for the music you're creating. Maybe this is why they considered it a sample instrument. It has melodic instruments and percussion. All of those things get put together in an ensemble. Here's one that's a hand percussion ensemble. Here's a melodic ensemble, so it's got not just percussion, but it's got bass and guitar, and it looks like a trumpet. It's interesting at the top here, you can control the key changes or chords that are being played. One trumpet, one guitar. And like some of the other instruments, this also has a mixer. So you can do all your mixing. Obviously with a guitar you only have one track, but with an ensemble you would have a lot more tracks in the mixer to play with. Another sampled instrument that in my books is more percussion than it is a melodic instrument is this Kinetic Metal. It's a bit unusual. You've got options to configure what they call the forge, or where the metal sound is coming from, how that affects your master volume, and what kind of waves are applied. There is motion, and in the motion you're adding an oscillator with different waves. Depends really on what presets you choose. And then you've got effects. These are all controllable with your dials. It's very much a tool that you play around with for adding unusual noises. The synthesis method here is pretty unique. I'll admit I don't understand all the details of it, but it is interesting, and the graphics are excellent. Sometimes a bit confusing, but excellent nonetheless. So there you go, yet another instrument in the percussion suite. Battery is the most extensive drum machine in the suite from Native Instruments. It's been around a while. It has 145 predefined kits here on the left. And they are based on samples in the sample library delivered by Battery. So over here, sample library has over 12,000 samples. There's a lot in there, not to mention the fact that you can have user kits, not just the factory kits. You can build your own, and you can bring in your own samples. The kits can have up to 48 sample slots. Really, Battery appears to be a sample player that comes with high quality samples from Native Instruments, but it does a lot more than just playing those samples. You expect to be able to click on any one of these cells. I'll tell you right out of the gate, something that's unusual is that normally The lower left pad in a pad configuration is C1, but it's kind of reversed in battery. The A1 cell is usually C1, and then it moves chromatically across. You see, it says down here what note you're playing. And it's a key range. It could be from one note to another or just assigning one note. You can modify these samples, of course, just like any other sample editor. You can pick the start and the end, and you have all of these parameters down at the bottom. And there's a volume envelope, velocity, kind of a engine that drives the amplification, a filter, compressor, and sends. And that's just on the main page. You've got effects that are very extensive and configurable. Everything from compressors and saturation to unusual things like transient modulation and something called lo-fi. The reason I say it's more than a sample player is that it does have extensive modulation capabilities. There's LFOs built into this, and you can assign anything really to an LFO. Generic setup information on the 4th page, and there is an editor that allows you to layer multiple samples, which is really cool. It's done in a nice way here too. So you can pick the velocity range for any given sample, and you can have multiple. You can have, I think, up to 8 layers here. Is there another one over there? At least 10 layers. So if you're looking to create a layered instrument, battery is pretty good for that. Are there layered kits in here? I think so, but I don't know where they are. I've never found one. You know, I keep clicking on different kits, looking for one that takes advantage of this layering. A grid that's up to 48, but the size is actually controlled here. Cell matrix size. So the maximum size grid is 16 by 8. Is that enough samples for you? That's more than 48. I still think it's great. But there's a lot of competing products out there right now. I think Native Instruments has done a great job of keeping up with the technology and introducing new concepts. Because the kit library and the sample library is so extensive, it takes months to get familiar with what's in there. You're best off to just find kits that you like, click on the star here to make it a favorite, and have it be easy for you to find. I think it's important to just understand its position in the realm of all of these drum tools that come with Komplete 14, and that is, it is the most extensive drum tool in the suite, where the other tools like 40 Zone, Empire Breaks, Butch Vig, they all have narrowed what they deliver to a certain style and genre, maybe taking advantage of sounds that are a bit more modern. But all of those sounds are also in battery. I'm going to explain to you later how expansions come into play, because every expansion that you download comes with battery kits. So while this list has 145 kits based on 12,000 samples in it, every time you get an expansion, it gets bigger. Let's just assign the size of this kit to something more manageable, like a 4x4. If you have samples from another source, maybe a different drum machine, or samples you downloaded free off the internet, or samples you bought in a sample pack, or samples you get from Splice or Loop Cloud or whatever source, you can easily bring those into battery. Let's just select all of these and drag them into battery. Now you've got those samples built in. I can click on a sample, can modify this sample. You see the amplitude's pretty low on some of these. I can shorten them. I can apply different levels of volume. I can assign the key. See over here there. It started with a chromatic pattern starting with C1 and ended with D#3. But if I want to make adjustments to the key range or the key assignments, you can do that all on this main page. I can add reverb. I can reverse the sound if I want it to be higher pitch. All of these parameters are kind of standard in any sample player, and battery is one of the most robust and complex sample players out there on the market. Once you've created your own kit, you can go under File and save your kit with your name, and it'll appear as a user kit. All right, we're looking at Polyplex, which is a drum machine in Reactor, and it's been around for a while. I think it came out with Native Instruments Komplete 10. But it's really quite interesting, and it has a lot of interesting features. So first of all, you'll see that there's 8 pads that you can assign drums to. And you might think, oh, that's kind of limiting. But each pad can be made up of 4 different sounds. You can see here on pad 1, it's made up of a kick, a one-shot, and another kick. And here on 2, you've got hi-hat, snare, clap, snare, clap, snare, clap. Each one of these layers, you can select a range of samples. So if you choose hi-hat, you're picking from about 31 different samples in here. You can see if I change the sample, I'm changing this sound. Okay, I can change the pitch. I can change whether it starts right away or eases in. And you got pan, left and right, and the relative volume. So when you have all of these things enabled, these are the relative volumes, giving you that layered effect, and this is determining what sample is being played for each one. And you may have noticed under the types of samples that you could choose for this, there is a user category. So in the user category, you could actually load up to 127 samples of your own. The other strength of this tool is that it has random capabilities, and depending on how far you pull this dice, you get a different level of randomness. The random dice up at the top here randomizes everything, whereas the dice down here at the bottom just randomizes the thing above it. Play this, but change the samples. If I want to lock a part and don't want it to be randomized, I can click on this little lock button, in which case the bottom two will only change. Like usual on the left, you've got many different predefined kits or presets. And the thing to keep in mind about those expansions is each one of them comes with a bunch of drum samples and beats, whether it's delivered in battery or one of the other drum machines. The expansions are yet another source for drum beats. I keep making these videos on topics that are of interest to me, and I'm hoping they're of interest to you. If you like this video, click on the like button. Consider subscribing, it helps my channel. But you know, I'm thinking about what are the reasons why you should subscribe. When I started the channel, I didn't really care about subscribers. I'm not in a hurry to monetize the account. I like it being ad-free. But there are certain milestones that I would like to hit, and I want to keep the channel going. If you're on side with that, click on the subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll get notified whenever I come up with a new video. Thanks for watching.